A man was enjoying a relaxing day at the ocean when suddenly a creature grabbed his foot below the surface of the water. What would make him scream so suddenly, and why was everyone staring? Welcome to Wonderbot Animals. As Francis and a few new acquaintances relaxed in Cadbro Bay on the southern part of Vancouver Island, Canada, one of them noticed something odd in the water near the shore. Initially, they weren't too worried, but their concern grew as the animals swiftly and gracefully moved their way. Its color evoked images of dangerous reptiles, and for a moment, they feared they were about to see something terrible. Right by the water, Francis had a front row seat to what was about to occur. At the same time, one of his acquaintances quickly used her phone to video the event, not knowing she was about to document a remarkable moment in nature. The unknown animal moved elegantly in the water, getting closer to land by the second. Mixed feelings of thrill and nervousness washed over Francis, not knowing what would happen next. As it got nearer, the animal's true nature became clear. It was no dangerous reptile, but rather something completely different and quite extraordinary. Francis and his companions were amazed as they observed the animal smoothly navigating the water, captivating them with its movements. Soon, Francis recognized the animal, and it brought joy to his heart. It was a sea otter coming towards them. Francis's companions were visibly moved, joyfully calling out to the sea otter, wishing it would come nearer. Although the sea otter couldn't understand them, the interaction was undeniably touching. Despite their wish to get closer, everyone stayed back. Knowing sea otters were wild and could be territorial, they understood that approaching it could be risky due to its ability to cause serious harm. So they chose to watch and appreciate its beauty from a safe distance on the beach, careful not to interrupt its natural environment. However, amidst the excitement of seeing the sea otter swim so gracefully, Francis saw something that astonished him. "Is it possible?" he thought. He moved slightly so that just his ankles were in the water, when suddenly the otter vanished from sight. Disheartened, Francis thought he might have frightened it away. He was about to return to his companions when an alarming feeling struck him. Out of nowhere, he felt a touch on his foot, followed by a firm grip. Turning back towards the sea, Francis couldn't help but scream when he saw the otter had returned, this time holding onto his foot as if inviting him to join in play. Those around him quickly took out their phones, yelling for him to come back to safety amid fears that the otter might attack him and transmit a dangerous illness. Nevertheless, Francis had an odd hunch that the otter meant no harm. In fact, he was convinced that the little creature had sought him out. As his companions stared in astonishment, he began to share a tale that rendered many speechless. This wasn't his initial visit to the region. Roughly a year earlier, he had come to the same spot for a relaxing holiday, unexpectedly encountering an otter. During that trip, Francis had the good fortune of coming across a sea otter family, not in the ocean, but on shore. He observed them from a distance as he pitched his tent near the shoreline for the night. As night approached, he saw the otters elegantly make their way back into the sea, blending effortlessly with the sea's currents and waves at the bay. It was a marvelous scene, confirming the otter's capability to flourish both on land and water. Yet, as darkness took over the bay and Francis settled in his tent, he was suddenly awakened by a loud, alarming noise nearby. Initially, he considered it might be a bird or another animal, possibly even the otter communicating, but he quickly realized his mistake. The noises persisted, becoming more insistent and alarming with each sound. Although he first dismissed it as typical animal sounds, Francis couldn't ignore the sense that something was amiss. Despite his attempts to engore the noises and sleep, their continuous cries pulled at him with each sound. Francis grew increasingly concerned. He found it intolerable to think that an animal might be suffering nearby, especially after he had just observed the majestic swimming of the sea otter. He wrestled with the decision to intervene or to respect nature's course. He was aware that interacting with wild animals might lead to unforeseen risks and potentially endanger both him and the animals. However, the desperate cries broke through his hesitation, compelling him to act. Determined to identify the source of the troubling noise, Francis picked up a flashlight. Even though the night was brightly lit by a full moon, he opted for additional precaution. Exiting his tent, he followed the sounds, becoming more certain with each step that the creature was in trouble. After a short trek, Francis anticipated discovering a bird or another creature, yet nothing was visible. He couldn't pinpoint the origin. Ascending a small watchtower designed for bay monitors to oversee the beach, the noise intensified. Francis scanned the area with his light, convinced that the sound was originating from his location, yet he saw nothing. He wondered if his mind was deceiving him. Then, hearing the noise once more, he realized the creature must be under the lifeguard tower. Descending, he was met with the surprise of his life. Below, caught beneath the structure, was a young sea otter, illuminated by his flashlight. Francis felt despair when he saw the scene. He regretted not responding sooner to the troubling noise. How much time had the animal spent caught in that situation? Every second counted now. He realized his immediate task was to free the entangled otter from its predicament. It struck him that the otter might have been attempting to join the others by the water, but found itself ensnared instead, struggling to break free. It voiced its annoyance. Without delay, Francis jumped into action. Navigating carefully, he made his way to the otter's location. With careful movements, he started to adjust the wooden beams, hoping to make enough room for the otter to slip through. Yet, the task proved difficult. The otter was firmly wedged. As he crouched closer, he switched off his flashlight to avoid further alarming the already stranded animal. The otter showed no signs of hostility, such as hissing or defensive gestures. As Francis moved closer, he was unsure whether the otter was too weary or if it sensed his intention to help. With the otter appearing calm, he inspected the wooden area under the lifeguard stand more closely to devise an escape route for the otter. Francis had to figure out how to dismantle a section of the wood that was securely fastened without startling the animal. He knew better than to try and haul the otter out forcefully, as that could worsen things. After thinking it over, Francis noticed that part of the wood trapping the otter was already partially loose, likely due to the otter's own escape efforts. Recognizing a possible solution, Francis carefully pulled at the loosened section, hoping it would come off and set the otter free. To his amazement, the otter seemed to understand his efforts and started to push and squirm along with him. With a final effort, the piece came off and the otter was free. Relief swept through Francis as he saw the delightful animal dart away, finally free. Drained yet joyful, he sank into the sand, knowing that his intense solo effort to rescue the otter had succeeded. As the otter explored its freedom, it sniffed around Francis, torn between fear of a threat and curiosity about its rescuer. Francis stood, keeping a modest distance, and gestured towards the water, encouraging the otter to head back. Initially reluctant, the otter eventually moved toward the bay, eager to rejoin its group. Yet, as it neared the water's edge, it paused and looked back at Francis under the moonlight before vanishing into the water. Even with the surprises of the day, Francis found himself grinning as he made his way back to his tent, feeling a sense of pride for having saved the otter. As the early morning light spread across the sky, he was certain this was an experience he'd hold dear and recount for years. What he didn't realize was that this wouldn't be his last interaction with the sea otter. Now, as Francis and his companions watched the otter glide through the water, he wondered if this could be the otter he had saved before. Was its playful behavior a sign of recognition? Though he was unsure, something inside Francis urged him to overcome his hesitation. Otters are naturally timid around humans, making it generally unwise to approach them. Yet, the otter's behavior, drawing near as if seeking connection, was too compelling for Francis to ignore. Before we continue with this story, like this video and let's reach 15,000 likes and subscribe to our channel. As onlookers recorded the scene, admiring the otter and sharing in the joy, no one expected what was about to unfold. When Francis ventured further into the shallow water, a quiet anticipation settled amongst the crowd, watching to see what would happen next. Then, in a moment filled with suspense, an extraordinary interaction began to take place between Francis and the otter, witnessed and filmed by those around. As Francis lowered himself into the water, the otter responded in an astonishing way. Instead of fleeing or becoming defensive, it approached him, circling and sniffing around his legs with curiosity, as if analyzing his clothes and movements. The otter then started to nuzzle and glide around him in an incredible show of trust and camaraderie, creating a moment of wonder as it made gentle contact with Francis's legs. Caught up in this extraordinary experience, Francis couldn't just watch passively as the otter frolicked around him. Whether or not this was the otter he had previously saved, he felt an undeniable bond with it. He reached out, cautiously bending over to stroke the otter as it swam around him. The animal seemed intrigued by his touch, sniffing at his hand, perhaps looking for food or simply savoring the moment of closeness. This remarkable interaction between man and otter was a spectacle of natural harmony and companionship seldom witnessed. After enjoying the company and the attention, the otter moved away briefly, but then came back to Francis, cuddling close to him one more time amid smiles and remarks of awe from those watching. Then, with a sleek dive, it returned to the open water, likely in search of its next meal. Watching the otter disappear into the distance, Francis was left with a strong belief that this was indeed the same otter he had rescued months earlier. A feeling of amazement and gratitude overwhelmed him, filling his heart with deep joy. With a peaceful exhale, he looked towards his companions, seeing their faces mirror the same wonder and appreciation he experienced. Overcome with happiness, Francis knew this moment would be etched into his memory forever. His desire for an intimate experience with the wilderness's creatures had been fulfilled in the most magnificent and unforeseen way. Unexpectedly, Francis's incredible experience with the otter propelled him to fame on the internet. The footage of their interaction quickly spread across online platforms, gathering millions of views and shares. Everywhere Francis went, he was recognized as the Otter Man, leading to an overwhelming number of interviews and podcast features. In these interviews, Francis was asked why he chose to approach a wild otter, given its uncertain behavior. He shared that young otters, like the one he met, tend to be sociable and inquisitive, especially when feeling secure and unthreatened. He emphasized that it was the otter that initiated the contact, seeking engagement and companionship, and he simply couldn't resist the opportunity to connect with the fascinating animal. Francis's popular moment with the otter not only moved him into the spotlight, but also highlighted the situation facing these wonderful marine animals. The tale captured hearts globally, igniting a fresh interest in the efforts to conserve otters. Institutions committed to the welfare of otters and their natural settings experienced a boost in backing, enhancing worldwide projects to protect these vulnerable creatures. What an inspiring tale of a profound connection between a human and a sea otter. Have you ever had a meaningful experience with a wild animal? We'd love to hear about it in the comments. Remember to hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell for more fascinating stories. Thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to welcoming you back for our next video.